The rain hammered against the windshield of the Mercedes, a relentless drumbeat that ordinarily would have fueled James Morrison's impatience. He had an important meeting in 20 minutes, a deal worth millions, and his schedule, meticulously crafted down to the second, rarely accommodated spontaneous detours. Yet, as he sped past the deserted bus stop, he slammed on the brakes, the sudden lurch of the luxury sedan a stark protest against his own tightly wound routine. He wasn't the kind of person who stopped. Not for strangers. Not for charity. His world was one of calculated risks and strategic maneuvers, where sentimentality was a weakness. But there she was, a lone figure amidst the downpour, and something about her bearing made him pause. She stood ramrod straight, like a statue carved from granite, utterly unyielding to the elements. Her military uniform, though soaked through, was immaculate, its dark fabric a backdrop for the gleam of her medals. She was a soldier, no doubt, and one who had clearly just returned from somewhere far away and very dangerous. There was a stillness about her that spoke of battles fought, not just on foreign soil, but deep within. He rolled down the window, the hiss of the rain momentarily overwhelming the hum of the engine. "Hey, are you going to stand there until you freeze to death?" The woman looked at him, her eyes holding a depth that spoke of too much seen, too much endured. "Thanks, sir, but I'm fine." Her voice was even, devoid of complaint, which only amplified James's conviction that she was anything but. "No, you're not," he countered, unlocking the door with a sharp click. "Get in. That's not a request." Lieutenant Diane Collins, 32, hesitated for a moment. After 3 tours in the Middle East and an impeccable military career, she had learned not to trust easily. Trust was a luxury, often fatal. But there was something in this man's voice, an authority that didn't come from arrogance, but from a deeper well, from someone who knew pain firsthand. It was a subtle resonance, like a shared scar. She got in. "James Morrison," he introduced himself, extending a hand across the console. "Lieutenant Collins." She shook his hand, her grip firm, deliberate. "Where are we going?" she asked, the words a quiet question that held a lifetime of uncertainty. "Home. My home." James watched her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were closed, the long lashes wet with rain. She looked utterly exhausted. "You look like someone who needs a safe place to process whatever happened today." Diane closed her eyes tighter. If he only knew. 3 hours earlier, she had been escorted off the military base where she had served for 10 years. False charges of insubordination. Career destroyed. Benefits suspended. All because she refused to keep quiet about what she had witnessed on her last assignment. The betrayal was a fresh wound, raw and throbbing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice barely a whisper. James was silent for a moment, navigating the rain-slicked streets. "Because," he finally said, his gaze fixed on the road, "I recognized the look of someone who has been betrayed by the very system she swore to protect." It was a strange answer coming from a man in a $200,000 Mercedes, a man whose life seemed a million miles from the gritty realities of military injustice. Diane studied his profile, jaw firm, eyes focused, but with a deep sadness that no amount of money could hide. "Did you ever serve?" she asked. "My wife did." His voice hardened, almost imperceptibly, as he continued, "before she discovered that some enemies wore the same uniform as you." The car stopped in front of a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine. Perfect lawns, huge windows, the epitome of the American dream. But Diane, with her soldier's eyes, noticed details most people would miss. Security cameras on every corner, reinforced gates, and James checking his cell phone compulsively, a man who had everything but lived as if he were on constant alert. "Welcome to the fortress," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "My daughter will love meeting a real hero." Hero. The word echoed in Diane's mind with bitter irony. If only he knew that at that moment, she was technically homeless, careerless, and had only $300 in the bank. Yet, there was something in the way James looked at her, not as a victim or a charity case, but as an equal. As someone who understood that some battles weren't fought on battlefields but in boardrooms and military courts. As they walked toward the front door, the rain finally easing, Diane had no idea that she was about to enter not just a house, but the center of a storm that would test everything she believed about justice, loyalty, and the true price of courage. If you've ever wondered how far a person will go to protect those they love, prepare to discover that some revenge is served on fine china, and that your true enemies aren't always across the ocean. Inside the mansion, the air was warm, hushed. James watched Diane study every corner of the room, her eyes trained to detect threats, the exits, the cameras, the blind spots. It was automatic, military behavior, confirming his suspicions about who this woman truly was. "Daddy!" A soft voice drifted from the stairs. A 12-year-old girl appeared, her curly hair framing a face that blended the delicacy of childhood with a premature maturity in her eyes. "Emma, come meet Lieutenant Collins," James said, the pride in his voice unmistakable, a raw, unguarded emotion that surprised Diane. She bent down to be at the girl's height. "You can call me Diane." "Are you a real soldier?" Emma asked, fascinated, her gaze fixed on Diane's medals. "I was," Diane replied, the word carrying a weight that James picked up immediately. Later, while Emma watched television, James served coffee in the kitchen. The quiet hum of the expensive appliances filled the comfortable silence between them. "Do you want to talk about what happened today?" he asked, his voice gentle, devoid of the earlier sharp authority. Diane hesitated, then decided she owed an explanation to the man who had offered her shelter. 3 months ago, during my last mission in Afghanistan, I witnessed something I shouldn't have seen. She paused, the words weighing heavily in her throat, tasting like ash. My commander, Colonel Bradley Mitchell, was diverting medical supplies meant for Afghan civilians. He was selling them on the black market and pocketing the profits. Soldiers under my command were dying because we didn't have enough equipment while he was financing a mansion in Virginia. James leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Did you report it?" "I followed the chain of command. Mitchell's second-in-command, Major Stevens, told me to focus on my own responsibilities." The irony in Diane's voice was cutting. 2 weeks later, during a rescue operation, 3 of my soldiers died because we lacked basic medical kits that Mitchell had sold the week before. "What did you do?" James asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I documented everything. Printouts of the transactions, photos of the supplies being loaded onto civilian trucks, recordings of conversations." Diane tapped her cell phone in her pocket. "When I got back to the United States, I took the evidence straight to the Pentagon." James saw the anger grow in her eyes, sharp and unforgiving. "And they destroyed you for it." "Worse. They accused me of fabricating evidence and attempting to extort a superior officer. They said I was a problem soldier with a history of insubordination, a history that miraculously appeared out of thin air." Diane laughed, a humorless, broken sound. "Within 72 hours, my 10-year career, my pension, my medical benefits, gone." "Is Mitchell still in command?" "Not only that, he was promoted to general last week." Diane's voice trembled with contained fury. "Meanwhile, I'm officially homeless with $300 in the bank and a tarnished military reputation that prevents me from getting any decent job." James was silent for a long moment, watching her, a profound understanding passing between them. Then he surprised Diane with an unexpected question. "Do you still have the evidence?" "Everything. Backups in 5 different locations." She studied him, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "Why do you ask?" "Because you may not be the first person Mitchell silenced." James paused, choosing his words carefully. "And maybe you found someone who knows how to use that evidence the right way." Diane raised an eyebrow. "What kind of business do you run, James Morrison?" "The kind that teaches powerful men that not every war is fought in uniform." He stood up, walking over to a shelf and removing a framed photo. "This is my wife, Rebecca. Or she was." The photo showed a beautiful woman in an Air Force uniform, medals gleaming on her chest, a radiant smile on her lips. She discovered that her commander was selling flight information to terrorist groups, information that resulted in the shooting down of 3 American helicopters. James's voice hardened, almost imperceptibly. When she reported it, she was charged with treason and espionage. Diane felt her stomach sink, a cold dread spreading through her. What happened to her? Suicide. At least that's what the official report said. James put the photo away with excessive care, as if handling something fragile and precious. She called me the night before she died, saying she discovered something big, something that was going to be in the papers the next morning. They found her body at 6 in the morning. The silence between them hung heavy, a shroud woven from shared grief and unspoken horror. After the funeral, James continued, I spent every penny I had investigating her death. I uncovered a network of corruption that went all the way to the top of the military hierarchy. But evidence isn't enough when the judges are in on it too. So you gave up? Diane asked, almost accusatory. James smiled, but there was no humor in that smile. I didn't give up. I changed my strategy. I spent the last 5 years building a military technology empire. Billion-dollar contracts with the Pentagon, relationships with senators, generals, journalists. He looked directly at Diane, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Sometimes, to beat the system, you have to become bigger than it. Diane processed the information, the scale of his ambition, the depth of his pain. You're saying that? I'm saying that maybe it's time to teach General Mitchell a lesson about underestimating people he considers disposable. At that moment, Diane's cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Diane Collins, you should have learned to keep quiet. Some truths cost more than a career. They cost lives. A friend. James saw the blood drain from her face. Threats. They know where I am, she whispered, her voice barely audible. No, James corrected, his voice firm, reassuring. They know where you were. Now you're under my protection. And trust me, Diane, I've learned that the best defense is a devastating offense. Diane looked at the man in front of her, seeing not just a millionaire single father, but a soldier in a different kind of war, a war fought in boardrooms and courtrooms, where revenge was served cold and calculated. Why are you doing this? She asked again, the question now laden with a deeper meaning. Because, James said, already picking up his laptop, the screen lighting up with government contract files, military officer profiles, and a network of connections that would impress any investigator. Some ghosts only rest when justice finally arrives. And because something tells me you're not the type to give up easily. As he typed, Diane realized she hadn't stumbled into any house, she had stumbled into a command center. And for the first time in months, something inside her that had been broken began to regroup, not in despair, but in anticipation. Mitchell had seriously underestimated who she really was. More importantly, he had completely underestimated who she had just allied herself with. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. 3 days after the ominous threat arrived on her phone, Diane's life transformed into a meticulously orchestrated bureaucratic nightmare. It began subtly, insidiously. Her bank account was frozen under the pretext of a financial irregularities investigation, a vague, sinister cloud designed to choke off her resources. Her rented apartment became untenable. The landlord had received an anonymous tip about suspicious activity, and suddenly, her lease was terminated. Her former military colleagues, men and women she had bled beside, stopped returning her calls, their silence a chilling testament to the unseen pressure being exerted. General Mitchell wasn't just trying to silence her, he was systematically erasing her existence, cutting off every lifeline, every avenue back to a normal life. He's using the classic playbook, James explained, as he pored over documents in his mansion office, his expression grim. Social isolation. Economic pressure. Destruction of credibility. My wife went through the same process. Diane held an official letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs, her hands trembling with contained anger. They denied my request for medical assistance. They said that because I was discharged under questionable circumstances, I'm not entitled to benefits. Her voice, usually so steady, wavered. 10 years serving my country, and now I'm treated like a criminal. The injustice burned, a fiery knot in her stomach. Just then, Emma appeared at the door, a small, comforting presence, carrying a cup of hot chocolate. For you, she said shyly to Diane. Dad said you're going through a difficult time. Diane accepted the cup, touched by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Mom was a soldier too," Emma continued, her eyes bright with a child's unwavering admiration. "Dad says women soldiers are the bravest people in the world, but not everyone understands that." After Emma left, a quiet warmth settled between Diane and James. "I need to show you something," James said, leaning forward. He opened his laptop and navigated to an encrypted folder, his fingers moving with practiced ease. "For the past 5 years, I haven't just been building a company. I've been building a network." The screen displayed a complex family tree of military, political, and media connections. Senators Mitchell thinks he controls. Investigative journalists with a history of taking down corrupt officials. Military officers who are clean and hate what men like Mitchell do to the uniform. "Are you suggesting an information war?" Diane asked, her mind racing to connect the dots. "I'm suggesting strategic justice." James clicked on another file. "Remember Rebecca? Before she died, she didn't just get evidence on her commander. She got evidence on an entire network, including a young major named Bradley Mitchell." Diane felt the blood drain from her face. Mitchell was involved in his wife's death. "Not directly," James conceded, his jaw clenched, "but he was part of the scheme she uncovered. And when she threatened to expose it." He paused, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. "Let's just say some accidents are very convenient." The realization hit Diane with the force of a blow. This wasn't just about her, or even about Rebecca. This was about a deep-rooted cancer within the system, and Mitchell was a significant part of it. The next morning, an unexpected figure appeared at the door. Senator Patricia Williams, a black woman in her 50s, a former military officer known for her relentless crusade against corruption in the Pentagon. "James told me about your situation," she said bluntly, without preamble. "And I've known Bradley Mitchell since he was an arrogant major who thought the rules didn't apply to him. Senator, I appreciate your concern, but I don't know if—" "Let me stop you there, Lieutenant Collins." The senator sat down, her presence commanding immediate respect. 6 months ago, my committee began an investigation into military corruption in the Middle East. We have suspicions, but we need solid evidence. You've appeared as a gift from heaven." Diane glanced at James, who nodded encouragingly. "What exactly are you proposing?" Diane asked, her voice tinged with a cautious hope. "That we stop playing defense," the senator replied, her eyes sharp. "Mitchell thinks you're just another troublesome soldier he can crush. He doesn't know he's messing with an operation that goes far beyond his petty ambitions." James opened a new folder on his computer. "Over the past 3 days, while Mitchell has been busy destroying your life, my cybersecurity team, all ex-military personnel Rebecca helped recruit before she died, has been monitoring all of his communications." The screen filled with printouts of messages, emails, and audio recordings. "He's not just selling medical supplies," James continued. "He's selling military intelligence to private contractors, overcharging the government, and using American soldiers as pawns in a personal enrichment scheme." "That's treason on multiple levels," Diane murmured, studying the overwhelming evidence, the sheer audacity of Mitchell's corruption. "And the best part?" The senator smiled with grim satisfaction. "Tomorrow, he's making a presentation to the Senate Defense Committee, asking for increased funding for equipment modernization. It will be broadcast live on C-SPAN." Diane began to understand the audacious, almost poetic plan. "You want me to?" "We want you to show up at that hearing," James said, his voice clear and resonant. "Not as an accused soldier, but as the lead witness in a Senate investigation, with backup from senators, irrefutable evidence, and national media coverage." "Mitchell thinks he silenced you," the senator added, her eyes gleaming. "Imagine the look on his face when you stand up in that audience, microphone in hand, with the entire country watching." That night, Diane couldn't sleep. She paced around the house, processing the magnitude of what was about to happen. James found her in the kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning. "Nervous?" he asked gently. "Not nervous," she replied, her gaze distant, fixed on some unseen point. "Determined." She turned to him. You've been planning this for 5 years. I've been preparing for the right moment for 5 years, James corrected softly. You're the right moment, Diane. Rebecca would be proud. Diane touched the cell phone where she kept her original evidence, the device now feeling like a powerful weapon. He really thought that by destroying me, he would destroy the truth. Men like Mitchell always make the same mistake, James said softly. They confuse silencing the messenger with silencing the message. The next morning, as Mitchell prepared for his triumphant presentation to Congress, completely unaware of the ambush awaiting him, Diane adjusted the lapel microphone that the senator's staff had provided. Remember, James said on the phone, coordinating with his tech team, the moment she identifies herself, send the files to all press contacts simultaneously. I want it to be too late for damage control by the time Mitchell realizes what's happening. Diane looked in the car mirror on her way to the Capitol. In 48 hours, she had gone from a homeless, disgraced soldier to the centerpiece of an operation that could change the entire system of military corruption. But as the Capitol loomed majestically against the blue Washington sky, one question hammered at her mind. Had Mitchell really underestimated the situation that much? Or was there something they didn't know yet? Because men who rise to the rank of general rarely survive that long by being completely naive about their enemies. That's when her cell phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. I see you found some powerful friends, Diane. Too bad they don't know the whole truth about you. See you at the hearing. Someone who knows your darkest secret. Diane's blood ran cold. Mitchell had discovered something that neither James nor the senator knew about. Something from her past that could destroy not only her but everyone who dared to support her. The war wasn't just beginning. It was about to become infinitely more personal and far more dangerous. The congressional hearing room was packed, C-SPAN cameras broadcasting live, capturing every anxious face, every nervous cough. General Bradley Mitchell strode to the podium, adjusting his impeccable uniform laden with medals. This was his moment, a stage set for triumph, where his presentation on military equipment modernization would secure billion-dollar contracts and, he hoped, another opportunity to embezzle millions. Honorable Senators, he began, his voice exuding confidence, our proposal aims to protect our soldiers with cutting-edge technology. In the audience, Diane took a deep breath, the anonymous threat from her phone still a cold knot in her stomach, but she pushed it down. James whispered beside her, remember, when Senator Williams gives the signal, stand up and identify yourself. The rest is in our hands. Mitchell continued his polished presentation, completely oblivious to the trap springing around him. Unfortunately, we face problematic soldiers who spread misinformation about our operations, trying to tarnish the reputation of dedicated officers. That was the signal. Senator Williams leaned toward her microphone, her voice firm and clear. General Mitchell, before you continue, I would like to introduce a special witness who has relevant information about your operations. Mitchell's smile faltered for a split second, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Senator, I don't understand. Lieutenant Diane Collins, please introduce yourself. Diane rose slowly. The blood drained from Mitchell's face as if he had seen a ghost. She walked to the audience microphone, each step echoing in the sudden, profound silence of the room. Good morning, General Mitchell, Diane said, her voice clear and steady, her gaze locked on his. Surprised to see me. Mitchell tried to regain his composure, his jaw tightening. Senator Williams, this woman was discharged from military service for fabricating evidence and it is precisely those allegations that she is here to testify about, the senator interrupted, cutting him off. But first, I would like the public to know what Lieutenant Collins really discovered in Afghanistan. James, sitting strategically at the back of the room, discreetly activated his laptop. In real time, files began to be sent to dozens of journalists in attendance, their phones buzzing simultaneously. General Mitchell, Diane continued, holding up a small audio device. Do you remember this conversation? Recording from March 15th, at 2:30 p.m., in your command tent. Mitchell's unmistakable voice filled the speakers, cold and calculating. Colonel Stevens, those medical supplies are worth $50,000 on the black market. Send them to the usual contact and transfer my share to the Cayman Islands account. The room exploded in murmurs. Mitchell jumped out of his chair, his face contorted. This is a fake. A montage. Interesting, Senator Williams said calmly. Because we also have these photographs. The screens in the room filled with images of Mitchell supervising the loading of medical supplies onto civilian trucks. And these bank records, James added, standing up and walking to the front, displaying transfers of $470,000 to the general's personal accounts over the last 18 months. Mitchell was losing control, his bluster dissolving into panic. Who is this man? He has no authority to. James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Defense Technologies, James replied with a cold smile. And the man who supplies 60% of the communication systems you've used to coordinate your illegal operations. Systems which, by happy coincidence, automatically record all communications for security purposes. The color drained from Mitchell's face. He realized the trap. He had used James's own technology to incriminate himself for years. Senator Mitchell, I can explain, he stammered, his voice cracking. General Mitchell, Diane interrupted, her voice gaining power, each word a hammer blow. 3 soldiers under my command died because you sold the medical equipment that could have saved them. Private Peterson, 22 years old. Private Williams, 24 years old. Private Rodriguez, only 19 years old. Her voice didn't waver once, though the memory tore at her. They died while you were buying your 3rd house in Virginia. The silence in the room was deafening, the weight of her words crushing Mitchell. He tried one last desperate gambit. You don't know the whole truth about her, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Diane. She killed innocent civilians during an operation. That's why she was really discharged. Diane smiled for the first time since she had entered the room, a sharp, knowing smile. General Mitchell, thank you for bringing that up. She turned to the audience, her voice ringing with clarity. That is exactly the lie he planted in my file after I confronted him about corruption. James activated a new screen. Here is the original report of the operation, before it was altered. Lieutenant Collins saved 16 Afghan civilians during a terrorist attack, risking her own life. And here, added Senator Williams, is the recording of the order General Mitchell gave to alter that report and create the false charges against Lieutenant Collins. Mitchell's own voice echoed again. Destroy her reputation. Make up whatever you need to. She can't look like a hero when we're tearing her down. Mitchell slumped in his chair, the weight of defeat finally hitting him. All the lies, all the corruption, all the arrogance, all crumbling live on national television. General Mitchell, Diane said, stepping closer, her voice resolute. You said that some soldiers are a problem. You're right. Soldiers who refuse to remain silent when they see officers betraying their own men are indeed a problem, for people like you. The cameras captured every detail of Mitchell's humiliation. His empire of corruption built through years of abuse of power was crumbling in a matter of minutes. James watched with grim satisfaction as reporters bombarded Mitchell with questions he couldn't answer. The man who had indirectly caused Rebecca's death was finally paying the price. The hearing is adjourned, Senator Williams announced. General Mitchell, consider yourself under formal criminal investigation. As Mitchell was escorted out of the room by military police officers, he passed Diane one last time. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, he muttered under his breath, his eyes filled with impotent rage. Diane stared him down, her gaze unwavering. General, in 10 years, I've learned that there are 2 kinds of soldiers, those who protect the innocent and those who protect themselves from the innocent. Today, the entire country found out which kind you are. As the doors closed behind him, Diane finally felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not revenge, but justice. The difference was that revenge would have left her empty, but justice was leaving her whole. James approached her in the hallway, crowded with reporters. How do you feel? Like a soldier, Diane replied simply. For the first time in a long time, like a real soldier. But as camera flashes exploded around them and Mitchell was led away in custody, one question remained. What happens when justice finally prevails? Are some victories too big to be true, or does the system sometimes really work when the right people come together for the right reason? 6 months after the hearing that shattered General Mitchell's career, Diane watched the bustling Pentagon courtyard from the window of her new office. She had been officially reinstated to the armed forces with all honors restored, a symbolic act of justice echoing through the halls of power. Now, she headed a newly formed Military Integrity Division, a direct consequence of the Mitchell scandal that had erupted across national headlines. The irony was a delicious, almost poetic twist of fate. The man who had tried to destroy her had inadvertently created her dream job. Major Collins, James corrected, entering with 2 steaming cups of coffee, a slight smile playing on his lips. Diane had been promoted 3 times in 6 months, a historic redress that became a case study in military justice, whispered about in hushed, reverent tones. "Did you see the news about Mitchell?" Diane asked, taking her coffee. James nodded grimly. Former General Bradley Mitchell had been sentenced to 20 years in prison for treason and corruption. His fortune had been confiscated to compensate the victims' families. His wife had filed for divorce, and his children had even changed their last names. Even more devastating, he was serving his sentence in a military prison where corrupt former officers were not exactly popular. "He tried to call me from prison last week," Diane continued, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "He said he wanted to apologize." "Did you take it?" James asked. "No. Some people confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. I forgave Mitchell for my own well-being, but that doesn't mean he deserves a second of my time." Emma came running in then, now 13 and radiating a confidence that mirrored Diane's own. "Diane, Dad said you won another award." "Military Integrity Award of the Year," James confirmed proudly, a warmth in his voice. "3rd this year." Diane looked at the stack of letters on her desk. "I get 50 messages a week from soldiers reporting corruption. The division he indirectly created has already investigated 23 similar cases on bases across the country." The phone rang. Major Collins, Senator Williams on line 2. Diane picked it up. "Great news," Senator Williams' voice crackled. "The bill to protect military whistleblowers passed the Senate. Soldiers who report corruption will now have automatic legal protection." After hanging up, Diane leaned back in her chair, a profound sense of accomplishment settling over her. 2 years ago, she was homeless, disgraced, standing at a bus stop in the rain. Today, she was literally rewriting the rules to protect honest soldiers. "You know what gives me the most satisfaction?" she said to James, a genuine, unburdened smile gracing her lips. "It's not seeing Mitchell in prison. It's knowing that no soldier will ever go through what I did. This law will protect generations." That night, during dinner at James's mansion, Emma asked a question that summed it all up. "Diane, do you regret reporting the general?" Diane looked around the table, at James, smiling genuinely, at Emma, growing up with an unshakable sense of justice, at a family built not in spite of adversity, but because of it. "Emma, the truth is an expensive luxury, but it's always worth the price. Mitchell tried to teach me that some secrets cost careers. I taught him that some silences cost souls." General Mitchell now shared a 6-foot by 9-foot cell, eating food from a metal tray and counting the 20 years he had left to live. Diane Collins headed a division at the Pentagon, lived in a mansion with the family she chose, and woke up every day protecting honest soldiers. The best revenge, she discovered, is not to stoop to your enemy's level. It's to rise so high that they become irrelevant. If you've ever faced injustices that seemed impossible to overcome, remember, the truth has a strange way of finding its way into the light.